I hope everyone has a full lunch and enjoy that sunshine. And yes, as when Jake arrived here yesterday and we had a meeting, he said, "Don't you all believe in air conditioning in this country?" Which is a true statement. And yes, on these days like today, we do be thankful that there is. This session is all about the Sloan program directors sharing their thoughts. And we've invited Andrew Likierman to chair this panel. For a majority of the people in the room, Andrew needs very little introduction, but because we like to do so, we shall. Andrew is a great example of both transformation and leadership. He has been, throughout his career, in industry, in academia, and for a period of time was the Dean of London Business School and led it through a significant transformation during his time here, and he's now returned to academia. He is also, to use the phrase of my friend Kevin last time at the 2016 event, Andrew is a platinum member. He has attended all 4 of the Sloan Summits, and he is well, indeed, he is well versed to chair this panel. So please, Andrew Likierman.
Thank you very much indeed. For the first 3, I was on time. I apologize for this. I did say 2:30 in my diary, so obviously I put it down. You can see returning to academia has a problem, because it's definitely not as efficient as it was. So somebody afterwards is going to tell me what time I was supposed to be here. So can I first of all apologize for the fact that I'm late? I'm very, very sorry for this. It wasn't intentional, I can tell you. Second thing to say is, as many people here will know, in terms of my relationship with the Sloan program, I've had the pleasure of teaching Sloans over many, many years. And I, along with most faculty members who teach Sloans, have enormous pleasure from this. The Sloan class is a very particular class. It's always got interesting people in, always got things to say, always have a great discussion. And so for me, the Sloan's a very important part of the London Business School. And I'm not just saying that to you, I've said it to people who are not Sloans as well, so I can assure you that's not just toadying to the audience. The other thing to say is that my colleagues Linda Grattan and Andrew Scott have written a book on the 100-year life and the implications that has. And it does seem to me that the Sloan, in a sense, by having people here in mid-career thinking about what they're going to do for the rest of their time, I mean, that is a really critical part of nowadays of the ways people's lives are going to go. So as far as I'm concerned, the Sloan program has more and more relevance as we go into the fact that people are going to work for longer and as they're going to live for longer. Just one last thing to say before I start the panel off, which is this says it is the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynaecologists. Just in case there's any doubt about it, we own this building, okay? We own this building, and we will be moving into it at the end of next year. So, I'm very proud of the fact that, that after so many years of looking longingly at it, we bought it with, and they have 3 years to find a new home, as it were. Okay, so what I'm going to do first of all is introduce the panel, and then we're going to have some initial comments from them on the subject, and then we're going to open it up for discussion and very much appreciate any comments and questions you have, because this is a subject that is important for everybody on the Sloan program. Particularly, I know there are sensitivities about the question of there is not as established an employment market for Sloans as there is for a number of the other programs, and that causes problems for people who have been on the program in some cases and not in others. But we're very conscious of the fact that having its own unique slot is both remarkable but also has an issue because of the lack of certain aspects of the market as far as the Sloan is concerned. So I think this is something too that we can talk about and raise during the course of the discussion. In terms then of who we've got on the scene here, I'm delighted to have the fact that we have people from both Sloan and MIT. I mean, I think this is the first time, I may be wrong, this is maybe the first time in which you've had people in the room in this kind of way. And so it's a great pleasure to introduce, first of all, Jake Cohen, who's the Senior Associate Dean for Undergraduate and Master's Programs at MIT, and Mike Hochleutner, who's Director of MSX Program, and I'm sure he'll tell us what that is, from the Stanford Graduate School of Business, as well as our very own Shona Macfarlane, who's Director of the Sloan Program, of course, as well as Business Improvement, always important, at the London Business School. So, very warm welcome to all three. Perhaps right to start, I don't know whether you know, who would like to start off with this? Let me have the one nearest to me here, who's Jake.
Sure. So first let me say thank you. It's a pleasure to be here at LBS. It's been a great morning, and obviously it's a very important weekend, so I hope everything goes well today. So again, my name is Jake Cohen. I'm the Senior Associate Dean for Degree Programs, and we think a lot about the Sloan Fellows Program. And it's great to be here in partnership with LBS and Stanford to build a network and to make sure that, you know, this 1 + 1 + 1 really equals 5. And I do believe in that. I think there's an opportunity to elevate the Sloan brand by working together versus all working individually and independently. But again, this is a big issue. So in terms of what Andrew was suggesting, the fact that the Sloan brand is not as well known as MBA or EMBA or some of the other degrees, and the support from career is something that we've taken a long, hard look at, and we've changed some things. So you may hear about it because it's fairly new, but we've decided to change the name to SF MBA. So it's going to be capturing the fact that the students at MIT, when they go through the program, they actually do, for the most part, about 85%, graduate with an MBA degree. And given that we see that the asset class of MBA is quite well known, and it adds value to our students, we've decided to change it to be SF MBA. So it's still going to be the Sloan Fellows Program, but they do earn an MBA, and we want to recognize that in the market, feeding into the fact that that is a more well-known asset class. But with that said, I think we can also work in partnership to elevate, working with partners, the brand of the Sloan program. So that's just maybe a first word.
Thanks very much, Jake. Mike, would you like to?
So let me also thank you for giving me the opportunity to come before you today. It's I think Jake and I thought we're coming to London, maybe we should be a little more formal, a little more stodgy. And it turns out we're the ones that are formal and stodgy. But I figure, you know, if people are going to give up their afternoon to come hear us instead of sitting in a pub and watching a game, the least I can do is put on my one good suit and put on a good face for Stanford. So thanks for giving us the opportunity. You know, I think about the theme today of you know, 50 years transformation, and really what I reflect on is the history of this program. And what I find is really the remarkable congruence between the three programs over 50 years in the case of LBS, 60 years in the case of Stanford, and really, you know, the longest time in terms of the history of the program at MIT. You know, a couple years ago, for the first time, I believe, we went out and actually did some joint school information sessions, marketing, talking about essentially the Sloan Fellows experience across the three schools. We did this in London, New York, and San Francisco, just to sort of, you know, do a little testing of that notion of doing some joint marketing. And as part of that, we brought in alumni, you know, in each city that came from three schools. And what really surprised me was that, you know, I found that if I closed my eyes and just listened to what they were saying in terms of the experience, the impact that it had on them, I could not tell which alum was from which school. And really, I thought I would be able to tell people from Stanford would be talking about, you know, technology or innovation or entrepreneurship, but really all the alums from the different schools talked about the transformative experience it had on them, the impact it had on them, the new way they saw themselves, their role in the business world. And you know, this is something that the program has evolved quite a bit at Stanford, and so I've seen that up close in terms of the evolution that we've seen over the years. But the fact that even today, I can look at the curriculum at MIT, I can look at the curriculum at LBS and see essentially people at this stage of their careers taking a full year essentially to immerse themselves, take a year off from work, but in some ways taking a year on to really learn and grow, focusing not on some specialized niche, but really thinking broadly about general management, enterprise level leadership, thinking about innovation and strategy, thinking in a global context. The format of 1 year full-time, mid-career general management is fairly unique to these three programs, and I'd like to see it grow. I'd like to see other schools come on board with that sort of format, but it says something about a particular opportunity for people that have a high tolerance, quite frankly, for the unknown and risk, that have a high degree of confidence in their own capabilities to grow and learn and become better. And even though there's may not be as established or as mass market a employment market for someone at this stage of their career to come out of school and go straight into the next opportunity for themselves, people recognize that over a 6 month or a year and a half period, they're going to be able to find that next opportunity and really sort of set their sights higher than they could have if they hadn't come into a program like this. So I don't know, I can't say what it's going to look like in 50 years, but I'm really excited to think that these three programs are going to continue to evolve, and I know they're going to evolve at Stanford. We're in the process now of doing some program review, and I think in another year or two we'll be actually looking at some format type changes that we'll be announcing. But I know that I expect that over the next decade or so, you're going to see all three programs evolving in ways that are going to in some ways signal, where that opportunity is for this type of leader, which is really someone who does not what they're expected to do, not what the sort of day-to-day mass market tells them to do, but is really willing to sort of go against the grain, be disruptive. But those are the types of leaders that I think the world needs more of. So, I'm excited to sort of see essentially how LBS, how MIT and Stanford as well continue to evolve this format, this program.
Thank you, Mike, very much. Shona.
Hi, so good afternoon. And I am the Programme Director of Sloan here at LBS. And just a show of hands, who is actually here from LBS, who's a Sloan alum or current student? Fantastic. So firstly, before I start into the formal piece, although I'm Scottish, I had to show my allegiance to the football with my dress colour this afternoon, though I'm not sure which colour they're actually playing in. I didn't know that much detail, so. But moving on to the formal piece. So I've worked here now at LBS for the last year, and it's very much I see as you've got both the LBS brand and you have also the benefit of having the Sloan brand, and that I think would be the same for both schools. So you can leverage in different directions depending on when you're speaking to recruiters or, as you say, others talking about the program. And I think it's interesting, we've taken different paths, and at LBS Sloan, although we're celebrating our 50th year, you could always reference the 100-year life to the Sloan brand and to LBS itself. It's had different evolutions. So at the moment, from the most current review, we actually are a specialist masters, and so we've taken a different route and seen it very much that we are as a specialist masters in leadership and strategy. And so you do get the business fundamentals, but we are looking at then, at that stage in your life, what are you looking to be more specialist in? But I think there is a lot of common ground still, and you reference the year out, the period of reflection, and I do hear as well from how it's put in admissions, you've all been very brave. You've gone out of that, as it's been explained earlier, your networks and the security of a job, and into the unknown. And I mean, I salute you for that. And it's then what happens next. And we've also heard today that can also take some time. So it might not be about your next job, but it would be about your next few jobs and your next career. So it's fascinating to see what does happen. And I think one thing that we're really looking to do at LBS is celebrate the stories more of the Sloan programme and the graduates.
Good. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so having got that sort of initial picture, as it were, and I mean, you can see, as it were, there have been very different routes taken by the three schools. Can I just ask, perhaps, our two American colleagues here, in terms of brand and in terms of employment, are these the same kind, do you face the same kinds of issues, you know what I mean, as we do here and over the years? So this isn't new. Is this? Jake, do you want to?
I'll start. I do know that one of the differences, sort of subtle differences, is the minimum work experience of the programs is a little bit different. So I think at Stanford we have a slightly younger cohort. I think MIT is sort of in the middle, and LBS tends to be a little bit more mature. I wouldn't say older, mature. So to some extent, we have a group of students that come into the program with 8 to 10 years work experience. They're sort of on the tail end of what we see in our MBA class. And we actually do see that those among, that sort of set of students will often be able to employ some of the resources that we provide to our MBA students, and they're still able to sort of fit in that, sort of peg, if you will. And then we've got students that are in the sort of 10 to 15 year work experience, and then people that are sort of over 15. And we see slightly different needs typically, depending on how far people out are from their undergraduate experience. And so we see a mix. And I would say, and I remind people about this is really not the difference between one program and the other program. This is just a stage of your career challenge. It becomes more challenging to make pivots and changes as you get further out, as you become less of a generalist, more of some sort of a specialist. People look at your track record, both in terms of the advantages it gives you to be more effective within that field, but also in some ways an ankle weight holding you back, because if you've been working effectively in finance, there's a bunch of people that don't think you're going to be able to make a transition as more of a technology-based field or something like that. So I think the program, as much as anything out there, does actually give people the opportunity to pivot. But we remind people it's not going to come easy. Our MBA students come in with an average of 4 years work experience. So after 2 years at Stanford, they've spent a third of their professional life at Stanford. So they can expect to be able to see some impact that has. If someone comes in with an average of about 13 years experience, which is what we see in amongst the Sloan Fellows, and spends a year at Stanford, that's only 1/14 of their professional work experience. So the expectation that they're going to be able to make that same level of pivot and smoothly transition into a different field is not realistic. So it is a challenge. But we have been working, providing more coaching resources, providing more market-based research, helping people to really understand essentially their own narrative in terms of the pivot or change that they're trying to make. And we've seen a fair amount of success. There's still there's always a set of 15-20% of the class that tends to take a fair bit longer to land where they sort of feel comfortable making that next phase of their career. And I don't know that we're ever going to sort of smooth that out to hit 98, 99%.
Do you want to comment?
So I agree with Mike that it depends on the age and stage that students are in. I also believe we have an obligation to our students, whether they're MBA, whether they're undergrad, or whether they're Sloan Fellows, to make sure that the transition back to the workforce is as smooth as it could be. So at MIT Sloan, the average age for the Sloan Fellow students is about 38, 13, 14 years of work experience, maybe 15. And they're very similar to our EMBA students, which we launched a couple of years ago, and it's been very successful, and the EMBA program has grown to 246 students. So if you really think about MIT Sloan today, it's very different from the way it used to be. We have roughly 350 students who are senior executives who are 40 years of age. So we must change, and we need to change the way we serve that population. So over the past year, we've taken some, again, decisions to restructure our career development office. On Monday, this coming Monday, a new assistant dean will join MIT Sloan. Her top priority is to think about the executive career development team. How do we serve and how do we make sure to create value from a transition back to the workforce for EMBAs, who some of them are looking to make a change after the program, and Sloan Fellows who need to come back into the workforce. So when Susan joins on Monday, that's really the top of mind issue that she has. But I do believe that a lot of it is the age and stage. We have different programs in terms of age and stage. We actually market segment. We don't want people who could be in the MBA program. So it's very important that the MBA has a certain feel. The Master of Finance has a different feel. And the senior executive programs, the Sloan Fellows and the EMBA, have a different feel. But all three need to be supported, and we've changed many things.
So, I mean, I think that, there's, despite the differences then, in the sense there's a feel that there is some commonality of issues here, we're addressing it in different ways. But on the assumption that, my initial assumption that this is a program whose, as it were, the need for which is likely to increase over time as people move around the workforce later in their lives, not necessarily at the beginning. So clearly there's an interesting issue here. And if that's true, it's not necessarily confined to the Sloan program, as it were. This is a more general issue about how people make transitions. Can I just move on to the question of perhaps just briefly, in terms of particular things you think that you've learnt, as it were, of things that perhaps the other two schools might think about as aspects of looking at these issues, looking at the role of the Sloan, the reputation of the Sloan, and so on, and seeing, what can be done? Is there something, that we can learn from each other about ways in which the profile of the program itself and its impact might be increased? Shona, can I perhaps start with you?
Well, we've actually just been working with some of our current students on this, about how to increase the profile externally. And some of this is kind of making sure they've got the tool set to be able to talk about their experience, and it's part of their personal brand and their personal story. So making, in terms of LinkedIn, what are you saying about the program when you're going to speak about yourself? How do you position the program? And recognizing that not everyone will know about that. That's kind of maybe a very simple practical piece, but it is making sure that, as you say, the practical of returning to work, we're covering all those bases. I think we're also looking at how we can integrate the curriculum and the practical element. So it was just mentioned to me by an alum yesterday, you have a biography course, but then how do you connect that with your CV and those practical pieces, and then making it, for the program to have both that reflection and academic component, which is why everyone's here, but also the practical piece of what does it actually mean to then move on with this.
Very good. Jake, any comments from you, your side?
I think one of the things you mentioned that resonated was the fact that people are going to come back to academic institutions to hone their skills, especially as they stay in the workforce longer. So we've started to use the word stackable degrees. We have students who come to a MIM, for example, the Master in Management, or the undergraduate program, or a Master of Finance when they're early in their careers, and they need certain skills. They need the skills to do well in their early 20s and mid-20s. But truthfully, the skills they need to continue to succeed in the future are different. They're around leadership, innovation. So what we want people to do is come back later, and we've seen that. We've seen students who graduated and a couple years later have come back. So I do agree that we will see more people thinking about doing the Sloan Fellows program or EMBA program to kind of tailor their skill set to where they are at different ages and stages in their careers. Because what you need as a 40-year-old executive is very different from the skills you need as a 24-year-old. So I think that's something we're thinking about. And truthfully, we're also thinking about how do we use online technology to help with that.
Talking about online technology, Mike.
Well, let me say a little bit about the question you asked first, which is, from one thing I'd say that I found, within Stanford was, one opportunity to strengthen the brand of the program was really to strengthen the brand of the program within the Stanford network. So this is actually just one of 2 master degrees that we have at the Graduate School of Business at Stanford. We have our MBA program, and we have the MSX program, which is the Sloan Master's program. And that's pretty remarkable to me that a school that's got a history of 90 plus years, and as I look at other schools, for the most part, I mean LBS and MIT included, there's many different master degrees, part-time, full-time, specialized, general, and yet at Stanford we've chosen to only do full-time programs and only do programs that are essentially general management programs. And yet this program has persisted for 60 years, as many programs have come and gone over the years. And so, when I stepped into this role a few years ago, it struck me that there was a certain sense that this program was kind of off to the side, not really at the core of what at least the perception amongst many faculty and certainly amongst our MBA students. So part of the name change was related to how do we have a program that feels like it's not associated with the GSB. The dean at the time told me when I was interviewing for this role, he said, "Why am I advertising for MIT every time I talk about this program, right? Doing Jake's job." And so, we wanted something that felt unique to Stanford and felt very core to Stanford. And so, we came up with a name, and it is an unconventional program, so it is an unconventional name, but the idea was to do something that's really only associated directly with Stanford, and connotes that this is a degree program, really at the core and the heart of what we do as a graduate school of business. And in that respect, I think we've been very successful. So I think the program has grown, it's better known, it's much more integrated across different aspects of the school. I think as a platform, it gives people at this stage of their career the fullest possible opportunity to leverage all the resources that we have at Stanford, both within the business school and across the university. And people can take, essentially any elective that's offered and take courses, work with faculty in any part of the university. And the recognition that gets amongst our faculty, amongst our alumni, I think has actually increased a lot of opportunities for participants in this program. Now, where we have not succeeded, I would say, is the broader recognition that we want to see in the marketplace. And this is a real challenge. There's the positive forces working in our favor is, as Andrew said, people are living longer, they're having longer careers, they're making changes, and so a program like this in some respects makes a lot more sense today. And yet when you look at the trends in graduate education, it seems that these transformative experiences where people immerse themselves for a year or more are being pushed earlier and earlier in people's career. And as you look at what people do to educate themselves later in their career, it's more incremental, it's part-time, it's either something that their company or organization provides, it's very company or industry specific, or like an executive MBA, it's something that you do outside of your day-to-day responsibilities. There's less willingness, it seems, on a macro basis for people to take a year off and pay the opportunity cost, essentially, of going back to school, and it feels very risky. And, so these are some macro trends that I think we're working against. And as a school, it's something that we're really looking at and trying to take a hard look at. One thing that obviously MIT is doing is, as Jake mentioned, the asset class of the MBA degree, changes how people perceive certain aspects. But there's a double-edged sword there, right? Because you graduate and you explain to people, I went back to business school, I got my MBA, and people ask the question, it still seems odd to them that at age 35 or 38 or 40, you'd be going back to school for something like that. The fact that we don't grant an MBA at least gives people the opportunity to explain why this is something a little bit different from a traditional MBA type education. But this is something that we're continuing to work on, and I look forward to essentially seeing ways that LBS, ways that MIT are looking at this as well. And honestly speaking, what I would love to see is 2 or 3 or 4 more schools that essentially adopt a full-time mid-career degree model. I don't know that that'll be the case, but I think it would do tremendous benefit to us to have a few more quote-unquote competitors that create a little bit more awareness of this type of format, this type of space. I think we're a great peer group, but we're a small peer group.
Now, I've been told that we should be packing up pretty quickly. Can I just ask one thing, because I'm feeling very guilty, even more guilty now about the fact we haven't got time for questions.
We'll have questions.
So,
We'll go to questions.
oh, we're allowed questions? Oh, fine, it's 1 minute for the... That's great, fantastic. Okay, right. Can we have questions? Thank you very much indeed.
Just click your fingers, Andrew. Watch what happens.
How about that? I'm not good on finger clicking. I wasn't told that was a skill I should have. Okay. So first question, have you got a screen up here? Do you have any thoughts on the potential tension or confusion between MIT Sloans earning an MBA and LBS Sloans who tend to be quite senior executives, very much not wanting our leadership and strategy MSc confused with an MBA? Should the schools collaborate on brand at all, or just in other ways?
Sorry, question.
Easy question, that, isn't it? Thank God I don't have to answer it. The answer should be, in principle, the answer should be yes. I think, but the question is, are there three different agendas here in being realistic?
I think, by the way, at MIT, students can earn a Master of Science in technology. We have an MOT program. We have Masters of Science in Technology, and Master of Science, or the MBA. So truthfully, there is a choice that students make. Which one of the three do they want to graduate with? 85% choose MBA. So it's not that they don't have a choice. They do have a choice. And I hear the question of what does that mean for people who don't have a choice? And that I'll leave to you.
I'd like to say they do have a choice before they arrive, and we have over and many choices whilst they're there, of course, but not in terms of the actual degree title. So we have over 800 executive MBA and Sloan students at LBS, so there is a large population in that area. As I think about this, it's about heritage. So the Sloan name means different things to different people. So I think it's use it to your advantage when you can. And so if it helps promote what you have done, although it might not be identical to what you did, it's opening the door to that conversation. And you very much are that, you represent the brand. So it's about you then having that conversation. Would be my take on it.
Yeah.
I would just say in terms of the schools collaborating, I mean, I'm all for collaboration where it makes sense. I think each school obviously needs to focus on making its program as strong as possible, attracting the best possible people that it can to the program. And over time, that's ultimately what's going to serve the brand, for all three programs to some degree, but, specifically for each program. But, what MIT does, what LBS does, we do get questions about it, even though I don't have any control over what happens at the other schools. And I do understand that people are comparing and contrasting, and so where we can share information, where we can do anything where some collective action would result in better results for all three schools, I think that's something that we should absolutely explore and do. And we've taken small steps, I think, when it comes to doing some promotion. What I think maybe there's some opportunities in terms of getting a little more media exposure around the brand, because so much, I think, of what drives recognition is what happens in the business press around business education and rankings and things like that. And because this program doesn't really fit into the standard categories of business school rankings, it sort of slips off a lot of people's radar. So if there was a way to affect that through some kind of a collective action, I think it could be quite beneficial to all three schools.
Can I just make one observation? I'm just listening to what you're saying. I mean, it's always struck me that the best advocates for the Sloan program are the people who have been on the Sloan program. And these are, you are a very, very strong group in terms of your range of your skills, the kind of experience you bring to bear. Is there any possibility, do you think, this is just, sorry, I've just concocted this now, forgive me, but, of saying, look, here are some histories of Sloans across the three schools. I mean, this is now a program we're going for a long time. I know there's an impressive portfolio from the London Business School. Perhaps one way of doing it is to say, actually, across these programs, look at all these impressive people and what they've done. Sorry, just a thought. Can we...
I love it, and especially as we think about one, perhaps, problem we're trying to solve. And just listening to what we discussed earlier today was how do you transition back to the workforce after the 1 year? Yeah. So I think there's an area for us to collaborate, to educate recruiters, explain this asset class, and maybe use some of the examples, as you mentioned, to kind of convey the message about the strength of the program. But by solving the problem of entering or re-entering the workforce.
It seems to have disappeared. Sorry, oh, not okay. That seems to be pretty convincing. Any final observations before we stop?
Go England.
Sorry? Good. Thank you. On your behalf, can I thank all three very much indeed for coming on Saturday afternoon. Look, make no mistake, this is a great program. 50 years down, let's go. Thank you very much.